son remained calm as the judge read the sentence, death by execution.
Josue Flores was murdered last Tuesday on his way home from school.
The men confessed to shooting the teen execution style.
There was some satanic type activity taking place.
Officers tell us Trujillo stabbed her boyfriend with stiletto heel shoes.
2-year-old Riley Ann Sawyer's brutal killing shocked the nation. She was beaten to death, stuffed in a plastic box found by a fisherman in Galveston Bay.
Former NFL player Antonio Armstrong Sr. and his wife, Dawn Armstrong, were murdered.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Antonio Armstrong Jr., guilty.
One by one, they described the deaths of the alleged other 8 victims of the convicted rail car killer.
This is probably one of the most cold-blooded, diabolical, heinous serial killer ever to live on the face of the earth.
I don't know how anybody could ever hurt a child.
An unusual number of children dying and becoming gravely ill during Jones's nursing shifts.
I just feel so sad for all these babies. And we got 5. We had 5 mothers who understood and knew what happened to their child. But I think we got 55, 60 that don't.
More than a dozen families have now come forward with information about their children's deaths.
We deserve to be heard. I mean, our children were murdered, nothing was done.
She was implicated in the deaths of 47 little babies. We cannot have someone like that free.
Sometimes you think the world's going crazy.
My baby girl, Rosemary, never had a chance in life to go to school, to get married, and to have my grandbaby.
How many children do you think Janine Jones murdered?
More than 60.
When you have a parent who's lost a child, you dealt with it every year. It was birthdays, it was Christmas, it was anniversary of death and things like that. And so you really don't ever stop having that void in your family. Kylie Holbrook, my sister was Chelsea McClellan, born before me. My mom is Petty Coates Weesey.
I said, something's wrong, something's wrong. And she was like, no, she's just mad because she's gotten shot, and she gave her another shot.
Chelsea stopped breathing. Doctors in Kerrville resuscitated her and sent Chelsea to a hospital in San Antonio. But in the chaos, Jones slipped into the back of the ambulance and gave Chelsea one last injection. Chelsea died.
After it happened, I kept saying, they did something, but I was the grieving mother.
Weesey's intuition was right. Investigators later determined Chelsea had been given injections of a powerful muscle relaxant, enough to sedate 6 full-grown men. What Weesey did not know was that before Chelsea's death, Jones was already under suspicion.
She was always very, I guess, empathetic of the fact that I was always there alongside her and everything, but again, she makes it to where I didn't carry any of those burdens, and I still don't feel like I've carried anything. I just feel like she carried all of them, and then I was there to support her, you know? But we always call it her legacy to see this through, and so that's why I'm here today. That's why Andy and I have kept a relationship all these years.
Andy Kahn, Director of Victim Services, Crime Stoppers. I got to know Petty, Chelsea's mom, back when I first started as a victim advocate in the mayor's office in the early 90s, and we were at it, fighting for keep her from getting parole back in the early 90s, and then of course had to tell Petty that parole is the least of your problems under Texas law. she's going to be mandatorily released, no ifs, ands, or buts, unless we can come up with a miracle, and that miracle being another case. I mean, it was crazy back then. So she gets convicted in 1984. Anybody in the state of Texas who was convicted between 1977 and 1987, it didn't matter what you were convicted of. It could be murder, injury to a child, it didn't matter, any violent offense, you were going to be automatically released as long as you maintained good behavior in prison. And because Jones fell in that 10-year period gap, she was on the track to be automatically released. So Petty and I would actually go up in person and meet with the parole board as well. And in doing so, again, we attracted a lot of attention by doing that. So we kept the case, in the public eye throughout the years. And then we knew we had to take it a step further because 2018 was closely approaching.
I get asked all the time, well, why do you keep doing it?
For 3 decades, Petty McClellan Wiese has carried a burden.
Why emotionally, why do you keep putting yourself through that? Because I have to.
Since 1985, McClellan Wiese has pushed for one thing, and that is for someone to take a closer look at Genene Jones.
There's been many times I've kicked, screamed, yelled, begged, pleaded.
Those long years of work paid off last month.
The fact that they definitely said, this needs to be looked into, this needs to be investigated, it meant everything.
Jones was convicted of killing McClellan Wiese's daughter Chelsea in 1985 by giving her an overdose of muscle relaxants. At the time of her conviction, Jones was also suspected of killing dozens of other babies during her time as a pediatric nurse in San Antonio and Kerrville. But since court records showed the now-defunct hospital Jones worked for shredded so many of the documents regarding the children's deaths, no prosecution for those cases was pursued.
Texas is going to release a serial killer of children.
I'd never seen her age so much, so fast, but it was not just her carrying her burden, it was her carrying these other moms' burdens, because these moms that finally did get called in to San Antonio around the 2013-2015 time period, they were still terrified. From the 80s, they were still terrified. And so mom carrying the burden for these moms too, I mean, she grew this relationship with them and they leaned on her. So I think that in addition to her own battle, she knew this battle was for them. So it was even scarier to her. It was more on her shoulders than I think that she ever imagined. My mom had passed away in between all of those things. She died of natural causes, but the stress of all of this was for her last year and a half. I mean, it was so much. I remember sitting in Nico's office after we had a formal meeting with him and Jason, and he said that this is very near and dear to him, and he had lost a brother at a young age. And that, to me, was him sharing to say, trust me, this is important to me, and I'm gonna carry you guys through this.
Follow the evidence wherever it leads us, and work diligently to count for every child whose life was stolen at the hands of Jones.
Petty was a warrior. You talk about a mommy honoring her child, the treasure of her life. She did it. I mean, the stamina that woman had, I believe that she's with her baby now. And she was a precious woman, just so gracious, just a woman of incredible integrity and grace. And I was just honored to know her. People heard about Genene Jones, the baby killer, for years. I have said many times, I felt there was a lot of reasons why that season of my life had me lead the DA's office in our community as a district attorney. But if the good Lord put me in office just for the Genene Jones prosecution, it was worth it.
She was a skilled nurse, and she used that skill in being able to do those things and her intelligence that she had, because you had to be intelligent to know what to do, what medications to give, how to cause babies to go into code blue that hopefully wouldn't kill them, but maybe they die, maybe they don't. you have to be intelligent to do that. And she used all of that for this weird, whatever gratification she got from hurting these children and trying to save them. Jason Goss, I was the lead prosecutor on the reopening of the Janine Jones case in 2017. From the people that I know that know her, because we interviewed every nurse that worked with her, she was cantankerous, she was difficult, she was hard to work with, she ran hot and cold, there was a lot of, she was mean, you know, that's how they described her. When I came back and worked for Nico in the DA's office, I had an investigator that was assigned to my court, a guy named Larry DeHaven. And Larry, one time we went to lunch and he said, you know, I'd really like to talk to you about this. I think that there's this case and nobody's really doing anything about it and it's terrible. And I said, okay, well, you know, yeah, what kind of case is it? And he told me, and you know, and I'm not from San Antonio originally, so I wasn't, and honestly, and I was born at the same time these babies were born. I'm the same age as almost all these victims. And so I had never heard of it, and I was shocked.
Dr. Kathleen Holland had 7 infants who stopped breathing and had seizures severe enough to require emergency resuscitation in her office.
And then my wife and I were watching Forensic Files, and the Forensic Files episode came on about Janine Jones. And so as we're watching it, my wife, who's also a prosecutor, she said, you know, that's in San Antonio. I mean, you can do something. Like, you can do something about that, because on the Forensic Files episode, I think at the end it said something like, she's going to be released in 2018. And so she said, look, you can do something about that. And so I said, all right, I will. I said, but I need a commitment from you, because I'm going to be, you know, it's going to take a lot of work. And she said, yeah, no, absolutely. Like, if you can keep that woman in jail, you need to do it. So that's when I went to Nico and I just said, look, I know that you've got some people that have been working on it, but I'd like to take a stab at it, and I'd like to see, you know, what I can do with it.
And I said, well, I was actually looking for someone for it, and you're perfect, because he's a hell of a trial lawyer and a very good lawyer just in general. There was 56 boxes of information that what was reported back to me was ignored. There was other evidence from other cases in certain boxes. It was kind of in the back of the white collar section. The way it was described to me is these boxes were not actively being worked. We had to give it CPR. They were in dire straits, but they were brought back. And that I really credit Jason and the team that he was working with, Jay and the people that we assigned there. Just phenomenal work done. Because you're talking about old evidence. They don't have the ways that we preserve evidence now. And then when certain evidence was ignored, I think a lot of people took for granted certain things, and evidence wasn't preserved the way it should have been.
What was it like when you first got the boxes?
Daunting. This case was a special case because a lot of times people understand cases to be started at a police department, and then the police department gathers the evidence and then they present it to a DA's office, who then presents it to a grand jury. This was a case that was actually investigated in the grand jury stage. And so the DA at the time, Sam Millsap, when he opened the investigation, it wasn't with the police department, it was literally prosecutors and DA's investigators in the early 80s that had convened a grand jury, and they brought all the witnesses and doctors and nurses into the grand jury. So a lot of those boxes just contained the transcripts of the grand jury testimony. When it got to us, we knew that a convicted baby murderer was on the floor doing these things at the time.
Because they'd already proven she killed
Because they'd already proven that she killed it. She was serving a life sentence. She was serving a 99-year sentence and a 60-year sentence for doing this exact thing. So the moment that I knew that we could really do it was Dr. Farinacci, who is a dentist now in Schertz, but at the time he was a medical technician, and he had a card for Joshua Sawyer that showed that Joshua Sawyer's Dilantin level was at a 59.6. And for reference, a normal Dilantin level would be somewhere between like 11 and 17.
Party's ready on the state of Texas versus Janine Jones.
In a Bexar County courtroom, the woman once dubbed the Angel of Death finally admitted to murder. Janine Jones pleaded guilty to the 1981 murder of Joshua Sawyer. Her sentence is life in prison. Joshua's mother, Connie Weeks, then spoke.
So I will leave you with this. I hope for you to live a long and miserable life behind bars. Goodbye.
You took God's most precious gift, babies, defenseless, innocent.
One of the things that we had with Joshua Sawyer that we didn't have with the other children was that Joshua's mother, Connie, she ended up getting all of Joshua's medical records back from the lawyer. And she kept them for all that time, you know, and she told me, she said, you know, I would, every year I'd bring them out and look at them and see like if I could see something, you know, to show that this woman did it, you know, and that she would be held accountable for it. But she said, but I didn't, because I don't know, you know, these medical records, which of course she doesn't, you know, how would she be expected to? But in that, in what she had, it had the nurse assignments, it had the bedroom, like the bed that he was assigned to. It had all of these things that showed that Dilantin overdose could be the only cause. The way that Joshua died and the symptoms that he had as he was dying matches up exactly with when somebody injects you with Dilantin and pushes it as fast as they can. They push that plunger down as fast as they can, because Dilantin is supposed to be given over about like a 2-minute period where it's slowly pushed in. But Joshua and how he died showed that it was not being done that way. It couldn't have been done that way.
What were those symptoms? You don't have to be too graphic, I'm just curious.
His heart stopped, but before it stopped, it was racing, it was beating irregularly. He was having all these different, and then eventually he flatlined. His mother went to the movies because she finally took a break. She'd been sitting by his bed, and she got told in the movies that she had to rush back, and then Joshua was gone.
So Janine waited for the mother to leave?
Yeah, probably. You know, I mean, she didn't always do that. We had another mother that watched her do it.
Right, yeah, I mean, because Petty, I don't know that was the Kerr County case, but I mean, he did that.
Did it in front of
Chelsea
Petty.
right in her arms.
Yep.